gosh, look at the crowd.
Come this way.
Those who spread goodness radiate happiness to everyone around them. Introducing LOLC Finance Credit Cards. Fuel the goodness in you.
Welcome to LMDtv. I'm Ashwini Vethakan, and joining us this week on Talking Business is the head of the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants Sri Lanka, Nilusha Ranasinghe. Thank you for joining us this evening, Nilusha. It's good to have you with us.
Thank you, Ashwini.
Nilusha, what are the notable achievements in the accounting profession in the country in a business context?
Right. So, as you know, there are many professional bodies in Sri Lanka directed towards the finance and accounting profession. As a main achievement in respect of the profession is where all professional bodies are on a common platform to develop the finance profession in Sri Lanka, and these initiatives will have a direct impact to the development of the Sri Lankan economy as well as capacity building in a business sense. So BPO KPO outsourcing industry is one of the main sectors where local talent is in demand both locally as well as globally. And this is another instance where the professional bodies are collaborating and creating synergies to develop the profession and the economy at large. So in a sense, the professions in Sri Lanka is in a business context collaborating because this is the way forward.
How has the education sector, especially financial education, changed in the last decade or so?
There has been, if I look at the education sector, actually directed towards the finance element, I mean accounting and finance profession, there's always been a myth that the finance function is more of a back office function and a number cruncher role, who sits behind a desk and predominantly actually carries out a back office function and is not out there facing the real world. However, in the last decade, the role of the finance professional has changed to a catalyst, or I would say a role of a business enabler. The finance profession has opened doors to strategic work all over the world, and especially in Sri Lanka as well. So if a company is looking well at business structuring, project management, commercial finance, strategy and leadership, or investor relations, the knowledge of finance will positively impact that individual and businesses across. So therefore, in the education sector, when you choose finance, when you choose accountancy, now you're looked at a business enabler who would be in that journey to enable the business to become a success.
As countries reinvent and rebuild themselves in response to COVID-19, how can the opportunity to accelerate quality education be implemented to overcome the challenges found in the education sector in Sri Lanka?
Right, that's an interesting part because, as you know, the pandemic has really put a vicious twist to the education sector itself, be it primary, secondary, and tertiary, I would say. So if we talk about what is quality education, first of all, quality education is a social, emotional, mental, physical, cognitive development of each student, regardless of gender, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, or geographic location. So quality education is also essential to achieving many other aspects, goals, be it poverty alleviation and reducing the reach, and also to create an equal platform and also to take off artificial barriers, I would say. So some of the basic elements that influence the quality education include the teacher and the teaching methods. So education content, learning development, management of the education institute, preconditions of pupils, and many more interconnected parts actually play a very integral role in this quality education. So if I may just touch on UN Sustainable Goals, there is a roadmap for quality education that has been rolled out by through the UN Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, linked towards quality education. And the world is nowhere near, I must say, in ensuring a quality education to all, when I say across the world, by 2030. The World Bank's matrix of learning poverty, which refers to children who cannot read and understand a simple text by age 10, is a staggering 80% in low-income countries. So in addition to COVID-19 crisis has put a vicious spin to all this, where the learning crisis, because it is creating inequalities across. Because as many as 94% of children across the world have been out of school, I would say more than now for the past year, due to closures because of the pandemic and the learning losses from school closures, be it preschool, primary, secondary, and tertiary. I mean, university systems have been more online. But as you know, education, quality education is not only what is written on in a textbook where you teach and where you deliver, but it's actually a holistic approach where your emotional quotients, where your technical knowledge, everything is taken together as a whole.
Nilusha, moving away from the education sector for a little while, what are your thoughts on climate change and how can organizations be part of the solution?
Right. So climate change is also a change. If you look at what is climate change, a change is it's actually a usual weather found in a place, and climate change includes global warming, driven by human emissions of greenhouse gases, which results in large-scale shifts in weather patterns. So research findings on climate change rarely offer grounds for hope, but a recent report from the world's leading climate scientists represents an ear-splitting wake-up call to impending global disaster. This particular study by the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, issued in October 2020, that is last year, warns that only urgent and unprecedented change will allow the world to contain the rise in temperature to a manageable 1.5 centigrade or 2 centigrade above pre-industrial levels. So the threat and potential risk to ourselves and the industry is clear, and we are beginning to feel the heat, both literally and metaphorically, you would say, because if you go out, you know that there is global warming out there. And the time to act is now. It's our collaborative and creative thinking and collective efforts that will help us progress in the global fight against climate change. Personally, I'm a believer that climate change, these kind of topics, people do talk about them at corporate level. I would say, these are topics that we should introduce even at primary as well as secondary level, because then you create a foundation for students to think about it. Because these are, climate, particularly climate change, what happens to the atmosphere, well, they are built into the syllabus, but how as an individual we should be responsible for it, should that responsibility element should be linked into the school curriculum as well.
And on that note, we'll be going in for a short break. Welcome back to the show as we continue our conversation with the head of the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants Sri Lanka, Nilusha Ranasinghe. Nilusha, what imminent changes in business practices should the next generation of finance professionals be prepared for?
Right. So the future generations, I would say the next generation should look at associating and learning RPA and AI together with big data analytics and blockchain. And also, this is actually when you come into the profession, but I would say at an earlier stage, soon after your secondary level school, and when you're choosing a particular qualification, a finance related qualification, do not follow the herd instinct. Choose a qualification which ensures data, digital and technology, strategy and innovation, leadership, advisory and consultancy, underpinned by ethics and professionalism. Because you may have all those commercial acumens in place, but you need to have ethics and professionalism underpinned, because that's where you will actually make a success out of your career. And also an integral part in your professional career should be to look at the emotional quotients as well. So what are the emotional quotients that one should look at? It would be creativity, emotional intelligence, vision, etc. Again, underpinned by technical and ethical competencies. Because we've come across mainly, in my journey, I have come across particularly, I would say, people who are they have multiple qualifications with them, but they do sometimes lack emotional intelligence, because EQ is something you cannot learn. It's not textbook driven. It actually is inculcated within you through your experiences, and you need to be savvy to what's happening around you. And it is something that if you are, I would say, focused as to what other people, empathy, emotions of others, emotional quotients are easy to learn and adapt. And when emotional quotients are actually put together with your technical skills, I would say any corporate head would recognize you to be a future leader.
What initiatives are in place to support accountancy students, members, and other stakeholders given the challenges brought by COVID-19?
So, as you know, what are the initiatives now we have in place? Let me re-jog my memory to 2020 March, when the pandemic hit Sri Lanka, particularly, and when there was a total lockdown. And I must say, majority of the learning partners were not ready to go online and did not have the required resources, the digital platforms that were required to have a continuous learning going on. But I must say, as usual, the Sri Lankan nature is we are very resilient and we adapt to change fast. So less than a period of 2 to 3 months, most of the learning partners got their act together, and they had all learning support, online digital tools, LMSs, learning management systems, and other digital resources which enable them to ensure that they continue with their learning digitally and will not disrupt the students' learning journey. So for students, I would say we have a suite of support resources available online, which are effective learning and revisions online, exam techniques which are actually rolled also online, and access to certain LMSs through partners, and technical articles and actually podcasts for learning as well. And if you look at that, is a learning part of it. And now with the current pandemic, and even before that, we are looking at rolling out all our assessments online. So our assessment mechanisms have exams at home, which we call them remote invigilation, and most of our exams are computer based as well. And for members and students and employees and other key stakeholders, we have our the mentoring programs, the soft skills development programs, and sharing of best practices both locally and globally. And all these areas have been moved to a digital platform. It's actually made very flexible for a professional to join in and to learn particularly, and also to connect these members and these other key stakeholders and give them adequate network opportunities, and also to connect them with other communities as well, because that's where the learning actually happens.
Our final question for this evening, Nilusha. Since the entire business world's attention has been diverted towards the COVID-19 pandemic, how can corporates balance their long-term environmental and sustainability goals?
With regards to sustainability goals, I would say where everything, if you look at the sustainable development goals, particularly, that's where you need to actually invest in your employees now, particularly because this is a pandemic that it is a global pandemic, and we need to invest in our people, I would say, because it's a time where innovation as well as inclusion as well as diversity has really come in. These three values in the corporate world, if we practice them and actually ensure that we inculcate them and cascade them to our teams at large, and then grow together, because it has affected every one of us. If you look at a report, 1 in 2 people across the globe, their incomes have been affected. And if you look at Sri Lanka private sector, there have been people who have lost their jobs, salary cuts. So we need to be, we need to be aware of those changes, and we need to make sure that we invest in our people and ensure that together we come out of this post-pandemic.
And that's all the time we have for this segment. Thank you for joining us, Nilusha.
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you for having me on your show.
Coming up next, we have the latest from the Neilsen Business Confidence Index. Stay tuned.
You love the feeling of being renewed. To stay beautiful every single day. To breathe just like we do, because you are truly delicate, protecting the ones who've been with us through the years. With Sayalac Care, the only wood coating that truly protects you. Sayalac Wood Coatings from JAT.
Welcome back to the show, and here's the latest from the Neilsen Business Confidence Index. Sri Lanka's economy is expected to expand by 3.4% this year, according to the World Bank. In its report entitled Sri Lanka Development Update, the funding agency says the country's recovery is likely to hinge on foreign investment as well as the normalization of tourism and other economic activities. However, the report also notes that a subdued global recovery may hamper demand for exports, while continued trade restrictions, economic scarring from the slowdown, and the high debt burden may weigh on growth prospects in the medium term. As the country looks to accelerate its recovery, striking a balance between supporting the economy through the pandemic and ensuring fiscal sustainability will be crucial, and the World Bank points out that a reform program could serve as a fiscal anchor to help reduce debt vulnerabilities and curtail its sovereign risk. Meanwhile, the latest Neilsen Business Confidence Index, which was carried out in the first week of April, suggests that the outlook is more positive as sentiment improved ahead of the festive season. The BCI witnessed an increase for the second consecutive month, surging 12 basis points to 138 in April from the previous month, registering the highest point for the index over the last 12 months. Notably, this also places its 12 basis points above its average for the period 110 and 11 notches higher than the all-time median of 127. Neilsen's Director of Consumer Insights, Terika Meenadenia, explains that the New Year euphoria seems to have taken a hold of both businesses as well as the general public. Sentiment was high at the time of the survey, ahead of the Aurudu celebrations, after a year when a nationwide curfew was enforced in April last year. While sentiment improved ahead of the festivities in April, Meenadenia stated that the BCI and the Consumer Confidence Index, or CCI, are likely to plummet if this is followed by a third wave of the coronavirus. In the April edition, we said that a downward trend in COVID-19 cases and deaths and Sri Lanka's ability to secure more doses of the vaccine will impact the sentiment. While the rollout of the second dose of the vaccine has commenced and new consignments are reportedly due soon, the rise in cases following the festive period along with new restrictions imposed by the authorities could undermine sentiment in the near term. What could add to the misery in this prospect of political gamesmanship leading to instability, which of course isn't new to Sri Lanka? Shifting our focus to the economy, perceptions among business executives about the economic climate improving over the next 12 months declined in April, with 27% of respondents to the latest LMD Neilsen Business Confidence Index or BCI survey saying conditions will improve, down from nearly half the sample in the previous month. On the other hand, 63% of those consulted by the pollsters expect the economy to stay the same during this time, while another 10% say conditions will get worse versus the 12% in March. However, the outlook for business prospects in the long and short terms appear to have improved. According to 81%, up from the 72% in the preceding month, of respondents, sales volumes are expected to improve over the next year. Meanwhile, a mere 2% say sales will decline during this period, down from 12% in March. When it comes to the short term, 60% compared to 49% in the previous month of those polled believe sales volumes will improve over the next 3 months, while 6% expect a decline. Furthermore, 70% of respondents say business has deteriorated this year compared to 2020. As for the investment climate, sentiment has deteriorated as only 8% of survey participants consider conditions to be favorable, a fall from the 15% recorded in the previous month. Moreover, a notable majority of 81% of the survey sample describes the investment climate as poor or worse, while 11% say conditions are fair, down from the 29% in March. The share of corporates planning to increase their staff numbers over the next 6 months has declined to 7% versus 13% in the preceding month. However, a large majority of 92% of poll respondents say their businesses will maintain their workforce, while only 1% expect to retrench staff in the coming 6 months. And that's all we have for this week. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for watching and stay safe.